My name is Raymond Aldrich, and I was 55 years old the morning my father called to tell me the house was going to my brother. It was 7:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. I was standing at the kitchen counter on Boardman-Poland Road. Not the family house, my apartment, the one I'd moved into after Margaret died, and the coffee was going cold next to the sink. The furnace was clicking on in that slow, reluctant way it always did in March. I had the phone cord wrapped once around my left hand without realizing it. My father's voice was steady. He said it had been a family decision. He said Darren had 3 kids and a mortgage and a lot on his plate. He said, "Raymond, you've always managed just fine on your own." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said I understood. Darren had no idea what was on page 3 of that deed. Neither did I, not yet. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge, the quiet corner of the internet where accounts get settled. If you've ever been the strong one nobody noticed, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My father's name was Frank Aldrich. He worked the line at a stamping plant in Youngstown for 31 years and retired with a pension that covered the basics and not much else. My mother, Ruth, kept the books for a dry cleaning operation on Market Street until her hip went in 2014. They lived at 3017 Boardman-Poland Road for 47 years, the same green shutter house where Darren and I grew up, where my mother kept a ceramic rooster on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, and my father kept his hunting licenses tacked to the inside of the garage door. It was not a large house. It was not worth a fortune, but it was a place my parents called home, and I had spent the better part of 20 years making sure it stayed standing. I am a construction supervisor. 36 years with the same regional outfit, Whitmore Aldrich Site Division. No relation to the family name, just a coincidence that made people ask at every new job site. I started at 22 as a framing laborer on a commercial build in Austintown. By 30, I was running crews. By 40, I had my supervisor certification and was overseeing multi-phase residential and light commercial projects across Mahoning County. I knew what things cost. I knew what deferred maintenance did to foundation. I knew the difference between a house that was being kept and a house that was being let go. The house on Boardman-Poland Road was being kept by me. In February of 2009, the furnace went. My father called on a Sunday evening, and I drove over in the dark and looked at it and knew it was done. I called a man from my crew on Monday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, we had a new unit in. I paid $4,800 out of my own account. My father offered to pay me back. I told him not to worry about it. That was February 4th, 2009. The following summer, I noticed a roof. 3 layers of old shingles, the flashing around the chimney cracking. A soft spot over the back bedroom that would be a leak by fall if nobody addressed it. I brought 2 men from a job site on the first Saturday of August, and we worked 3 weekends straight. My father handed me a check for $300 when we finished. I took it because I didn't want to embarrass him. From January of 2008 through March of 2014, I sent $600 a month to my parents' joint account. 74 consecutive months. My father never asked me to start, and he never asked me to stop. It was just money that appeared, and they used it, and we did not discuss it. When my mother's hip surgery came in October 2014, I was the one who sat with her through the recovery. For weeks, every evening after my shift, I would drive to the rehabilitation facility on Glenwood Avenue, sit with her for an hour and a half, drive home. My brother lived 40 minutes away in Canfield. He came twice. My wife, Margaret, had passed 3 years before that. Cardiac event, sudden, a Thursday morning in May when I was already on a job site in Niles. She was 51. We had been married 26 years. After she died, I moved into the apartment on Boardman-Poland Road, smaller, cheaper, closer to my parents, and I redirected what I would have spent on a house Margaret and I had shared into the house my parents still lived in. It felt like the right thing to do. It felt like the only thing to do. The property itself had a small cedar box on the shelf in my parents' bedroom closet. My mother mentioned it once. In passing, after a conversation about the will, she said the original deed was in there, along with some other papers. She said it the way people say things they don't expect you to remember. My stomach dropped slightly when she said it, for a reason I couldn't articulate at the time. I filed away and did not think about it again. Not yet. That was in the spring of 2014. My chest went still in the way it sometimes did when something landed without explanation. I covered the property tax shortfall in 2013. The amount was $3,847. My father's pension check was delayed by a processing error at the county, and the due date was the 15th, and I wrote a personal check on the 14th and drove it to the treasurer's office myself. My father paid me back 4 months later, in cash, in an envelope he handed me at Sunday dinner, without making eye contact. In March of 2015, the Tuesday before Easter, the water heater went. My father called at 9:47 p.m. I drove over in work clothes and had it swapped by 11:15. I remember the date because my mother had a ham thawing in the refrigerator for Sunday, and she kept saying she hoped the cold water wouldn't affect it. I painted the interior of the house in the spring of 2016. 7 rooms, 2 coats, for days of vacation time. My brother stopped by on the 3rd day, looked around, said it looked good, and left. Darren was 5 years younger than me. He had been an easier child in the way that some children are, sociable, quick to laugh, the one who filled a room. My parents loved me, I believe that, but with Darren there was something more visible in it. He was the one they called first with news. He was the one they mentioned when talking to neighbors. When my father got sick for the first time in 2017, not seriously, a cardiac scare that resolved in 3 days, the first call he made from the hospital was to Darren. I was not bitter about it. I want to be clear about that. I had known for a long time how the current ran in my family, and I had made a separate peace with it. I showed up. I did the work. That was what I knew how to do. What I was not prepared for was what came next. My father called on a Tuesday morning in March. He said the house was going to Darren. He said it had already been decided, and that a transfer document was being prepared, and that he and my mother wanted to let me know before it was filed. I asked if the decision was final. He said it was. I asked if there was a reason. He said, and I can still hear the exact register of his voice when he said it, "Raymond, you've always managed just fine on your own. Darren has 3 kids and a mortgage." It made sense to the whole family. My throat tightened. I kept my voice steady. I said I understood, and I told him I'd talk to him soon, and I set the phone down on the counter at 7:31 a.m. The coffee was cold. The furnace was still clicking. 3 weeks later, Darren and Connie came to Sunday dinner at the house. I was there. My parents had made a pot roast. It was the first time we had all been together since the call, and nobody mentioned the transfer directly after dinner, while my mother was in the kitchen. Connie sat down across from me at the dining room table and said, in the reasonable tone she used when she was being precise about something, "Raymond, you've always managed just fine on your own. It's a family decision. We all talked about it." I looked at her. I didn't answer. Something behind my sternum went very still. "Darren has a real situation," she continued. 3 kids, a mortgage, and his income isn't what it was. You're single. You have your job. It just made sense. I said, "I understand your position." She nodded as if something had been resolved. It had not been resolved. The following month, my father had the transfer document drawn up. I was not present. The property at 3017 Boardman-Poland Road was signed over to Darren and Connie Aldrich by warranty deed on March 8th. I learned about it when my father mentioned it at a phone call later that week. He said it had gone smoothly. He said the attorney had been efficient. He said Darren was already talking about updating the kitchen. My face went still when he said that. I held the phone with both hands and looked at the wall. I didn't say anything about the kitchen. What I thought about was a cedar box. In the fall of that year, my mother's health began to decline more seriously. She passed in November of 2016 on a Thursday at Mercy Health in Youngstown. My father followed her in the spring of 2019, peacefully at home, which was Darren and Connie's home by then, which had once been my parents' home, which I had reshingled and repainted and refinanced and kept for 20 years. I was at the house on the evening of my father's funeral when I asked Darren if I could go through the closet in the back bedroom. He said, "Sure, go ahead." I found the cedar box on the second shelf. I opened it. Inside was a folder of documents, insurance papers, The original mortgage discharge from 1997, a folded survey map. At the bottom, the original warranty deed from when my parents first purchased property in 1971. I took the folder to the kitchen table. My breath caught when I opened the deed. It was 4 pages. The first 2 were standard: property description, grantor, grantee, legal meets, and bounds. Page 3 was where I stopped. I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I folded the deed carefully, put it back in the folder, put the folder under my arm, and walked out to my truck. I sat in the parking lot of the funeral home's reception hall for 11 minutes. Something in me went quiet. Not relief, not triumph, just a long, slow settling. I drove home on Boardman-Poland Road with the radio off. The road was wet. The streetlights on Glenwood were doing that thing they do in November, where the light pools on the asphalt and makes everything look older than it is. I put the folder on my kitchen table and left it there overnight. The next morning, a Saturday, I was at the table at 6:03 a.m. with the deed and a yellow legal pad. Page 3 contained a handwritten amendment clause, initialed by both my parents and witnessed by a notary, dated June 14, 1998. The clause was 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph described the east-facing bedroom addition, the one I had built that summer with my own hands and my own materials, at a cost I had never disclosed to anyone. The second paragraph stated, in the plain language my father preferred for everything he signed, that in the event of any transfer of the property at 3017 Boardman-Poland Road, the party who had constructed and financed the east bedroom addition retained a reversion interest in the property equivalent to the documented value of that addition, to be satisfied in cash at the time of transfer or converted to a partial ownership interest at the retaining party's election. My father had known. He had put it in writing in 1998 and said nothing about it to anyone for 21 years. On Monday morning, I called Howard Kessler. Howard was an estate and property attorney I had worked with twice before on job site easement issues. Sharp, economical, not given to speeches. I drove to his office on Wick Avenue at 9:52 a.m. and put the deed on his desk. He read page 3 without expression. Then he read it again. He said, "Raymond, do you know what this is?" I said I had a general idea. He said, "This is a valid reversion clause. It was properly witnessed and notarized. It was never voided by the 2014 transfer because," and here he paused and looked at me over his glasses, "because whoever drew up the 2014 transfer document never pulled the original 1998 deed." My hands went still on the armrest. Howard Kessler filed a lease pendens on 3017 Boardman-Poland Road at 9:42 a.m. on a Thursday, 3 days after our first meeting. I did not tell Darren. I did not call Connie. I went to work on Tuesday morning and ran a framing inspection in Canfield and drove home and made dinner and did not tell anyone what was in motion. On October 12th, I drove to the Mahoning County Recorder's office on Market Street. Donna Presley was a county recorder on duty, a careful woman who knew the filing system the way some people know a piece of music. I explained what I needed. She pulled the original deed microfiche at 2:18 p.m. and laid the printout on the counter between us without a word. The amendment clause was there, clear, initialed, witnessed. 2 days later, Carl Obenhaus, a notary at the Mahoning County Clerk's office, certified the signature match between the 1998 initials and my father's known signature samples from a mortgage discharge. He completed the certification at 11:15 a.m. on a Friday and handed me the folder with both hands. In the weeks that followed, Darren had been busy. He had hired a contractor and was planning a kitchen renovation. He had pulled permits. He had gotten an appraisal, $214,000, which I learned from the county filing, which was public record. He had told his kids they would be living there by spring. My stomach turned when I pulled up the permit application online. His contractor had started preliminary measurements. Connie had mentioned my apartment to a mutual cousin at a family gathering that September. She said, in that reasonable tone, that Raymond had always been fine on his own and that some people were just built for solitude. My throat went dry when the cousin told me. I let that settle for a long time before I responded, and when I did, I said only that I hoped everyone was doing well. I kept my face neutral at the next interaction I had with Darren. A brief conversation, at a cousin's birthday gathering in early October. He talked about the kitchen. He talked about a new fence along the back property line. He talked about possibly converting the garage. I said the house had good bones. He agreed. He had no idea. The meeting was set for 9:17 a.m. on a Thursday in the third week of November. Howard Kessler's office, Wick Avenue. Darren and Connie arrived 4 minutes late. Connie had a coffee. Darren was wearing his good jacket. Howard explained the clause. He read it aloud from the certified copy. He explained the lease pendants. He explained the reversion interest and the two options, cash settlement or partial ownership conversion. The room stayed quiet when he finished reading. Darren looked at me. I nodded. Connie's face went pale. She set her coffee down and looked at the folder and then looked at Howard and said, "This can't be right." Howard said it had been reviewed and certified. He set the county recorder's printout on the desk and the notarized signature certification next to it. He set them without flourish, the way he did everything. Darren said, "Dad never said anything about this." I said, "No, he didn't." My chest tightened when I said it, not from anger, from something older and quieter than anger. Darren looked at the deed. He looked at the amendment clause. He looked at the date June 14th, 1998. He knew what had happened that summer. He had been 27 years old and living in an apartment in Canfield. He had not been there when I built that room. The silence in Howard's office lasted a long time. The resolution was civil and legal and took 4 months to finalize. Darren elected the cash settlement option. The documented value of the 1998 edition, adjusted for the subsequent maintenance contributions Howard's team compiled into an exhibit, came to $87,400. The figure was arrived at by 2 independent assessors and was not contested. Darren took a second mortgage on the property to fund it. Connie did not attend the final signing. I received the transfer on a Tuesday in March, 9 years, almost a week, after my father's original call on a Tuesday morning in March. The check was cut by Darren's bank and handed to me by Howard Kessler at 10:14 a.m. in his office on Wick Avenue. Howard shook my hand. I put the check in my inside jacket pocket and drove home. I made coffee when I got back to the apartment. I did not call anyone. I sat at the kitchen table until the light changed in the window, the way it does in March when the sun is still low and the angle makes everything in the room look cleaner than it is. Raymond Aldrich, 64 years old, and the East Bedroom Edition is still standing. He built it in the summer of 1998 in 4 weekends with his own tools and his own materials because his parents wanted a room that faced the morning. The quietest rooms are the ones where everything has already been decided. He came home. He turned the lights on. He sat with what was his. 36 years of early mornings. 1 page nobody read. And one brother who finally understood what a deed actually means. When that contractor showed up to start Darren's kitchen renovation and found the lease pendants notice on the door, what would you have done in Raymond's place? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.